Okay, did anybody keep track of when we started this text? When's that? A long time ago. That's pretty correct. Can't go wrong with that. Of course, it's a relative term. A long time ago. Right? So, studying this for a year, studying for 10 years. We have finally made it to point 7. Not that we were in any hurry. But, a 7-point mind training. I think this is like our, probably somewhere close to 30th session to get to our 7th point. And so the idea, though, is that as we work through a text like this, we hopefully take a little time to reflect upon it and take some lessons and think about these teachings and try to use them in our daily life. The whole point of 7-point mind training is that we have these tools to transform our daily life into Dharma practice. And that's really where the 7th point is getting. It's getting at what are the practices? What are the practices of mind training? And he makes a point, Alan Wallace, in this text on his commentary, that a lot of times the very things that we do in our daily life actually undermines the whole of the practice. So we could be a really good practice. We could meditate. We could go to Dharma teachings. We could, set a path of enlightenment for the benefit of all sentient beings. And then the actions that we do during the day actually undermine that whole path. And so he's got a beautiful analogy in here. It's like taking an axe to the bottom of your boat with your daily activities. It's kind of and then that boat's not going to do so well. So it's really important then to think about this journey and how am I going to engage in my daily life in a way that is truly fruitful. And that's really where point 7 is getting at. So the commentary, Sechabua, comments that really these practices, their whole purpose is to prevent the spiritual maturity, the growth that we're making from degenerating, and also to really encourage our further use, because we can fall into a way of it being too burdensome, too much. Just want to watch Netflix. Come on. Just one night. So like the pledges of the 6th point, this entails a series of many parts applicable to many occasions and facets of life. So the 6th point is the pledges. These are the practices. And as with the pledges, it's worthwhile to look at just a few each day. Don't attempt to do all 20 at once, or you might feel overloaded. So the idea here is that he suggests that we meditate on for a little time in the morning or afternoon. To take 1 or 2 and really think about them, bring them to mind. Because if we don't bring them to mind, they stay in a nice little book off of here, and I read that, and then I go off into samsara and a busy mind that's off into other things that doesn't come to mind. So to just take a little time and to let them soak in a little teaching, much like we do with the 8 verses, to let it really come to mind and start to think about, how does this look in my life? How does this particular tool look in my life? What's that feel like for me? And if we do a few a day, then it's a really nice exercise. One of the trainings I had early on was to pick 6 a day, 6 sort of precepts that I have, and bring them to mind in the morning, and then check in throughout the day. First one, how am I doing with that? So, I'd stop and I'd check it. a few hours later, I'd stop and I'd check again on a different one. So I'm bringing it to mind. So I would cycle through, because as you engage with precepts, you may find that you have many. And with my monastic life, yeah, there was well over a couple hundred to keep track of. So that could be a bit overwhelming. So, you could work with 6 a day, though, and just sort of work your way through them. So it's a real valuable tool to think about. Each, I think we did 3 or 4 last time. So, call them to mind and see what that looks like in our life. So he's saying here that it's nice to meditate quietly on a few of them for a short time, and then hold them in your mind throughout the day. The great advantage of mind training is that it does not matter how busy we are. For those who yearn to practice Dharma in a very active life, the mind training presents an opportunity and the material to work with. And so that's really the gift of what we're getting into today. I won't comment too much on that. So, if we can spend maybe 10-20 minutes daily to call to mind some instances from the past that relate to the points that we're studying. Instances, for example, when we may indeed have sought out our own happiness at the expense of others. We can recollect that we are not immune to the faults in question, and then, having looked at the past, anticipate how these faults might surface today in subtle or gross ways. So just kind of, here's a point. Then what's an example from my life where that's happened? And then how is this kind of potentially going to happen in the future? And so just taking a little time to bring it to mind. And then here's the point that he's really making. There are certain forms of behavior that are incompatible with living happily in this life, and that damage the possibility of a fortunate rebirth in the future. Moreover, on a deep level of practice, such behavior is counterproductive in so much as we are seeking to cultivate it, a stable meditative mind. Loving kindness, compassion, realization of the ultimate nature of reality, these are things that we want to cultivate. But these actions that we engage in actually undermine it. And that's where the example he gives here is, it is as if we are setting off on a long sea voyage for a hobby while whacking a hole into our ship with a pickaxe. Not very good. Not a very good way to stay afloat. And so this is one of the things I think that can't be spoken of enough, and I think that is a common problem, is what I do outside of my meditation affects my meditation. And a lot of times our practice is this thing I do in the corner or in the morning, and then in the evening I might do the practice. And then, throughout the day, there's nothing going on there. There's nothing that is really focused on how do I engage in the path of Dharma. And that's this actions that really undermine the ability to have some mental stability, is the ability to cultivate compassion, kindness. And if we're not mindful of our interactions, then it's going to be very difficult. I was listening to a talk by Jetsuma Tenzin Palma a little earlier today. And what an incredible being. But she said early on, when she was training with the yogis, they told her that she should check her mind, every hour, at least 3 times. At least 3 times, check your mind. You have to know what's going on with your mind. She's reading from a verse from Atisha's trainings where it actually says, be aware of your mind at all times. And she says, well, that's pretty hard if you're not aware of your mind ever. So if you're not able to be aware of your mind at all, it's going to be really hard to be aware at all times. So these yogis said, every hour, stop and be aware. Be aware of where your mind is, what you're doing. Check your mind. And so she encourages that practice, the idea that it doesn't take long to check your mind. It takes a moment. Just stop, pause. Where's my mind at? What's my motivation? What's going on? And then there's an opportunity to reset. Now, if you think about how little we do that in daily life, wow, how little do I know where my mind is, what's going on, and how I'm building up habits and thoughts and causes and hooks to get angry, frustrated, stressed, worried. If I don't make the time for that, it's going to be hard to really cultivate the ability to make healthy choices that are actually going to support a path to enlightenment. So he's just making a point here that we're going to strive to really be aware of how we're living our life, and is it in accordance with something that A, is going to make this life a little better. And by better, I mean more inner peace, more well-being, more resiliency, contentment. And B, really in this long-term strategy of eliminating all mental afflictions, of achieving enlightenment, of liberation. Am I engaging in activities that are undermining that? And chances are we probably are. But we can become aware of them. And that's where this 7th point is really going to direct us at some practices to be more aware of what these habits are that actually undermine a path. So he says, basically when we take precepts, as I was talking about earlier, I have a lot of precepts or vows. That's what they're there for. They're there to protect you. They're not the idea you can't do this. It's like this liberates you from causing a lot of stress and worry and fear in your life. You're free of these things. So a lot of times they're called individual liberation vows or freedom vows. That when you take these precepts, they're really an opportunity to become free of really unhealthy habits. And he says here that nobody's going to police you, nor are we taking these as precepts. So these are just practices. There's not formal vows. But insofar as we recognize unwholesome patterns that are incompatible with our deepest yearning for a meaningful life, it is to our advantage to strain them out and replace them with a new type of conditioning, familiarizing ourselves with wholesome patterns of behavior so that they become spontaneous. Some of these practices will be spontaneous at first because transforming ingrained... That can't be right. Let me reread that. Some of these practices will not be. That sounds more accurate. Some of these practices will not be spontaneous at first because transforming ingrained patterns of behavior can require arduous effort. Given that our patterns are so ingrained, it's going to be really challenging to change some of them. So it's really an idea of a practice that we get better at. So he's just letting you know that this is nothing to get worried about, stressed over. Just know, we're embarking upon a journey. It's worthwhile, and ultimately, it's just the fundamental way that we'll be happier in this very life, even though that's not the goal, right? The idea is that in this very life, we do a lot of things for a temporary happiness that undermines my sense of worthiness, value, and being good in just this life, let alone this journey of enlightenment. And it happens in really subtle ways. Very subtle ways sometimes. Which we'll pause because I'm wanting to get ahead of myself. Can you get ahead of yourself? Is that possible? Yourself ahead. Not sure. I don't want to get ahead of the book in the text of what's going on. So the first practice is really the fundamental point of all mind training, and that is practice all yogas by means of one. So practice all yogas by means of one. And the comment that's being made here, there's thousands of practices within the context of Buddhism. Aside from the practices intended while sitting in meditation, there's practices for eating, sleeping, there's practices for all kinds of situations. You pick up Dharma books, there's lots of different lineages and practices and things to do. And Setchabua points out that those of us who have entered the door of this Dharma can practice the essence of all those yogas, all the spiritual practices, by means of the mind training. So all yogas into one. This training, which essentially is the cultivation of two bodhicittas, can transform any other type of activity, particularly for those of us leading very active lives, where the demands of the practice may struggle. It's a real struggle. I got this and that to do. May struggle against the demands that life's circumstances make on our time. This tension between the longing for more time for spiritual practice and the needs of family, job, bills, it's not necessarily a negative thing. What we do with it is the critical point. So this is really the whole point of everything that we've been doing, is that most of us here have things to do. We have a conventional life that we're engaged in. And when we look at a path to enlightenment, well, that is a pretty big commitment. It's a tall order to rid myself of all mental afflictions and to engage in this life in a way that's truly supportive of not grasping to a misperceived reality that creates all this karma. So that's why there's yogis that'll go spend 20 years in a cave. Or maybe we don't have that kind of opportunity, and maybe we don't have the conditions for such things. There's people that will spend a great deal of time and energy going out for a couple of years, achieve shamatha, and then pick up a vipassana practice, and they'll set about doing 3-year retreat or so forth. Well, that's probably not our life, right? Most of us probably don't have 12, 18 hours a day to meditate, or a conducive environment to continuously do that. And some of us, it seems like a really amazing deal that we might get an opportunity to go do that for 3 months. And even that sounds like a faraway thing. So if we're not in that situation, then what do we do? And what he's making a point here is that the fact that we have a life that is conventional, that has responsibilities, does not need to be a barrier. Doesn't need to be a barrier. Because when you're in such a situation, there's kind of 2 steps that a lot of people take. One is that they are in a condition where they can say, you know what, this is the most important thing, and that's what I'm going to do. And I'm really not going to worry about job, career, bills, things like that. I'm going to focus. I'm going to go into the Dharma path. So for some people, that's what they come in. They bump up and they go, here's the obstacle. You know what? If I'm really going to make my life meaningful, I'm going to let go of the obstacle, and I'm going to really just make priority the path. So that was something I bumped up against, early on. And so I took monastic vows, and I got rid of the house, I got rid of all the stuff, and that's what I did. So, but I was in a condition for that. My daughter was off to college, and I was single, and I had a teacher right there. It was all ripe, So I got completely out of debt, and that was the thing to do. So I happened to have had the incredible karmic conditions that gave rise for me to bump up against it and go, I can set that aside. And that's the thing. it's not common, right? Not common. The other thing that happens then, people bump up against this busy life and the Dharma, and then the more common response is this: I'm too busy for all that. Come on, really? There's people meditating 18 hours a day. And, I'm lucky to get 20 minutes. No, this just isn't for me. You know what? I'm just going to focus on making my life as good as I can. And maybe I can create some space later in life. Maybe later in life. Maybe, I can, work hard, retire early, then I can set some time aside. And then maybe I can do the practice then. I can set it off. So that can be a common one. Sometimes just people say, well, maybe next lifetime. Maybe next lifetime. I've actually had monks say that before. Are we going to go do this? Maybe next lifetime. Which I don't think is a very productive attitude, because this rare and precious human rebirth is now. It's right now. Who knows how many eons to get this again. So I'm not in a situation where I can just make this the priority, let go of everything. And the second choice doesn't sound very inviting, to try to make samsara really comfortable to where maybe I could practice later. So the third option, which is where he's talking about now, third option, transform all yogas into one. And what he's saying is that the third option is to transform my daily life's activities into the path of awakening. That everything that I do, then now I'm going to cultivate two bodhicittas. So that's the main practice, right? Point 2. Ultimate and relative bodhicitta. So that everything that I'm doing, whether I'm doing grocery shopping, even if I'm delivering pizzas, that this is Dharma practice, that this is going to be Dharma. If I'm eating, this can be Dharma practice. And so, how does that happen? Well, ultimate and relative bodhicitta. Ultimate bodhicitta, we're really focusing on the interdependent nature of things, their empty nature, and the causes and conditions that give rise into the life that we have. So, in other words, living in reality. Okay, aspiring to do that as much as possible. And so how do we bring that into mind? Then relative is the compassion activities that really nurture that habits and conditions that cut out this self-cherishing. So fundamentally, can I engage in activities in my day that bring about the nature of reality and are an antidote to my self-cherishing attitude? Yeah, we can do that. So one example is eating. A lot of times we sit down and we eat. Sometimes we might even taste the food after the 5th bite, right? Or if we're in a really interesting conversation, we may not. Food's gone. Wow. Maybe we had first few bites pretty delicious. After that, the eating, talking, who knows what's going on. But sitting down to eat a meal, this can be Dharma practice. We take a little time and we take a moment before we eat and we think about all the causes and conditions that gave rise to this meal. How many people suffered so that we could have this meal? How many people's got a paycheck because we have this meal? How many people were involved in this ripening of me having a meal to nourish myself? How many animals, how many things came together so that I can have this meal? Well, now I'm really bringing about this sort of ultimate bodhicitta, where I'm realizing the preciousness of all these causes and conditions that gave rise so I can have this meal. And then I can cultivate the thought, may I use this nourishment to be a benefit to all sentient beings. May it arise in me in a way that is conducive to truly be a benefit to others. Now I'm transforming a very mundane activity of eating into cultivating two bodhicittas, to understanding the interdependent nature of my experience, and the aspiration to use it in a way that is truly beneficial. So we can bring that attitude to literally everything that we do. And it was a talk like that that actually started my journey. It's when they first started brainwashing me into becoming a monk, I think. There's a Geshe who talked about how to do this. I went to a Dharma talk. The Geshe was from Ganden Shartse Monastery. Really loving, sweet. He talked about he gave clear examples. And the one I remember the most was going to the bathroom. Just letting go of that. May this feed all the bacteria and all the little nutrients that can help all sentient beings. Can this help me be productive to be in that? And it was after that talk that from him that I went and inquired about how I could be more engaged in the Dharma Center. And who knew that a couple of years later I would be a monk, and that Geshe, who I met one time, would be my teacher in India at the monastery. Loops and how things come. And now today he's the abbot. Small world. But this point that he's making says, well, everything I do can be Dharma practice. What makes something Dharma practice and what makes it not Dharma practice? What makes something mundane and what makes something Dharma practice? Well, is it cultivating these bodhicittas? Is it accumulating, another way of looking at it, merit and wisdom? Am I engaging in this activity in a way that is going to fuel my own sense of self? Or am I engaging in this activity to become selfless? To rid myself of self-cherishing, to see the interdependent connection of myself and all things, to recognize my true nature? Well, if it's doing one thing, solidifying my ego, it's not Dharma practice. I don't care if you're saying prayers. I don't care if you got the cool malas. I don't care if you've taken monastic vows. If you're engaged in a practice that is solidifying your ego and reifying things for yourself, that's really not gonna, that's the hole in the boat. Doesn't matter what.
It has to do with intention in your mind stream all the time.
Right. Attention to the mind stream, right? Motivation. And so if I can bring about that awareness to pause before I engage in activities, I can transform mundane activities into this path, right? And that could be whatever I'm doing. It could be whatever I'm doing. So this is the third option. First option, give up everything, go the Dharma. Second option, give up on Dharma, try to make samsara real good, hope for the best. Maybe one day you'll find it again. Third option, use the time that we have in very productive ways to transform our mind streams into the path. So that means that, and it's going to get on this next point, so I won't get too far, but the idea then that in order to, as Tenzin Palmo says, to know where my mind is, I actually have to have some practices to know where my mind is. So we have to cultivate, meditation practice, so I can check in. And then to be fully present into the transient nature of the experiences I have and how I can use things, because there's nothing that happens in my life that is not an opportunity to cultivate merit and wisdom, cultivate ultimate and relative pleasure. There's nothing, right? There's no activity that is not an opportunity for that. Even feeling sad, noticing the sadness as it arises, as it comes and goes, being willing to endure that with patience in ways that hopefully I can purify and be a benefit to others. So this first practice is then making your life Dharma practice. All yogas in one. That really point to here that this mind training is mind practice. All practices in one. And the practice is bodhicitta. Practice is bodhicitta. Ultimate relative bodhicitta. That I'm going to use this life for the benefit of all sentient beings. And I'm going to really use all my activities in ways that eliminate self-grasping, which is the source root of all my suffering. Okay, so yeah, he does eating, does some other activities here. So, but he's making a point. Eating, taking care of the body, going on vacations can all be part of spiritual practice. All of us need time to relax. But it need not be a break in spiritual practice if we recognize this too as a way to refresh ourselves, restore vitality, good cheer, and balance so that we can serve again with creativity and intelligence. So that's another extreme people get into. You know, like everything's Dharma, and if I screw this up, then I'm not a good practitioner. Oh my God, how could I take a break when I could have been meditating? You know, now, is that Dharma practice? No, that's undermining of Dharma practice. That's, again, reifying the sense of itself, and as opposed to recognizing that, you know, sometimes the best spiritual practice is a walk in the park, as opposed to sitting there trying to muscle through another meditation. So, that we really need to be balanced in that practice. Every time I come up on a teaching like that, I remember sitting in a jacuzzi once talking to a Swami of a different tradition. And I said, sometimes, she told me, sometimes the most spiritual thing you can do is sit in a jacuzzi. I had been on the road a long time. It was, you know, working with the monks a long time. It was this rare respite. So basically it gave me permission to do that, which was really nice. Not a bad jacuzzi either. So that doesn't need to be a problem. A balance. Even Thai forest monks I spent some time with up in Northern California. They had they had like a sauna. They had a sauna. I thought, man, that's pretty cool. You guys get a sauna. I said, oh, it's within our tradition. It's pretty common because it's really good for the body to relax the muscles and all that for other meditation. So they even do this balance. So with this one yoga, we can transform everything we do. All actions can be employed in the cultivation of ultimate and relative bodhicitta. For those of us with many demands on our time, this is an utterly priceless system of practice. It can ease the tension between mundane demands of the world and those of the spirit by transforming worldly activity into the source of spiritual nourishment for ourselves and others. So just think of, I'll give you one practice that is just fundamentally just beneficial, that I think all of us could use daily. Patience. Wow, how would that be? Just noticing the tension and then just noticing patience. Well, this is what's happening now. And I'm going to be here with this person, attentive, kind, for the benefit of all sentient beings. Just patience. I mean, what a gift that one is. And guess what? You get a lot of opportunities in a busy day to practice patience with yourself, with others. So, talk about a way of making your daily life practice. Try to be patient with yourself, with others. You know, such a ripe way of being. And so, but in order then to be successful at that, we'll get into the second point, which is, I guess it's the third sub-point of the seventh point that talks about that. Yeah, so second part of our seventh point is to counteract all withdrawal by means of the one. And so I'll read a bit about this. So the first one is transform, all practices, just all yogas into one. It's really about everything I'm doing is focused on the bodhicitta. And now counteract all withdrawal by means of the one. That's our second practice here. So the root text for the second practice instructs us to use one attitude to counteract all withdrawal. So entering into a spiritual practice, we may occasionally come to the morose conclusion that we were better off before we started. Oh my God, I was so much happier. Ignorance is bliss, right? My God. I mean, I can't even enjoy my own TV show anymore. We may feel that our own mental distortions are stronger, that we are more uptight, or that people seem to get angry at us more often. Perhaps our family disapproves of us practicing Buddhism. We may feel that the emphasis on service in the cultivation of bodhicitta demands a kind of spiritual suicide, giving up everything, never thinking of ourselves. We may become dejected and withdraw, thinking that the project ahead of us is hopelessly overwhelming. There's just so much house cleaning to do in this mind of ours. Procrastination becomes a wonderful crutch here. Maybe when we're older, better yet, in the next lifetime, then it'll be easier. We put our practice on the back seat or throw it out the window altogether. So, these are not uncommon thoughts that arise. So he says, what to do? Well, first of all, when we become discouraged and begin to withdraw, recognize what's happening. I am disillusioned with the practice. I thought I would progress more quickly than I have. Then recognize also that in this world there are so many beings who, like ourselves, are striving for happiness, wishing to be free of suffering, and who are engaging in ineffective means for accomplishing these ends. Setchabua suggests that we counteract dejection by reaching out to all sentient beings around us, offer our body, virtues, our prayers, that they meet with effective means for finding true happiness and freeing themselves in sufferings. In other words, when we get dejected, we remember we're doing this for everybody. And there's an incredible energy that comes from that practice. When we have a friend come over or someone that we really care for, it's amazing what we'll do for them. We'll fix up the house. How many people, the only time you clean their house is when guests come over? Well, because I want you. And when we think about how we want to please some people in our lives and the efforts, whereas when I'm just alone on the couch by myself, maybe I'm not so motivated to do this stuff. Sometimes sitting at a Dharma center, right? There's a retreat this weekend, so this place will be full, and there's an energy around that everybody's here meditating. I'm going to meditate a little better. There's a purpose there. Well, if you recognize that you have the opportunity to help all other sentient beings, there's a good inspiration. The prior abbot to our monastery, to this current one, he's a young man, really devout, really virtuous abbot. When I knew him before he was abbot, he was ill a lot. He was very he practiced the Vinaya in a very particular way. He didn't eat after noon. He was really doing things, and had some physical conditions. And then he became the abbot, and now he's in charge of 1,300 monks. The abbot, all the stuff that you do. It's an incredible schedule. And I remember him giving a talk once, and he said, "Well, what do you do when you get tired? Like, how do you sustain yourself? That's a big job." And then he said, "Yeah, there's a lot to do. It's a big job, and sometimes I get tired." And then I remember bodhicitta. I remember all the sentient beings are depending on me. Because then I have energy. I remind myself that I have a very rare opportunity to help all sentient beings, and I bring that to mind. And when I remember that, I have a lot of energy. And then it sustains you. So, a lot of times in our Western mind, we sometimes think, that's a pretty big task. The other way of understanding it is that what a gift it is to have such a purpose. And so rather than withdraw, I have the opportunity to be inspired that by being a little kinder to the clerk at the sandwich shop, I'm making a real difference in the world. I'm making it in this world, but I'm making a much bigger trajectory, that I have the opportunity to ripen conditions to achieve enlightenment for the benefit of all sentient beings. And when you look at all the suffering out there, and that's the point he's making, is we can see virtually, just the vast amount of humanity engulfed in mentally afflicted states with coping mechanisms that just don't work. And we see that suffering. Now we can join in. Or we can recognize that we have an opportunity to help them. That we can offer this practice to them. So just that like compassion that gives rise for all of our dear ones. We have the opportunity to do that. And that's a way of sustaining you. So that's what he's suggesting here, is when we get discouraged, remember that. Very few human beings have the opportunity to help all sentient beings. Not all the chairs are full tonight. Some people are watching Netflix. And some people, we had to talk the other day to somebody. Yeah. The nun's coming this weekend. Boy, that's an incredible opportunity to do the 6 perfections and all that. Yeah. But I also have this chance to go to this concert in Denver. They might go to a concert in Denver. Not a right or wrong thing, but how many concerts in Denver are going to help you alleviate your mental sufferings and transform your mind to a path of awakening? Not to say you couldn't go there and be of benefit, but the point I'm making is that a lot of people equate the two as though they're the same. And so there's a rare and precious human rebirth, 18 specific qualities, and one of them that has ripened with just the fact that you're sitting here is that you have the conditions to know and recognize the suffering nature of that grasping mind that's just seeking entertainment and pleasure that creates it's the seeds of mental and emotional suffering in our lives. And that is invaluable. So we can recognize that happens with people. We can think, well, hey, I don't have to do that. I don't have to create more suffering in my own life. So the takeaway here is also something that I'm going to add John commentary on. So this could be entirely wrong. This is the good stuff. But when we live in reality, that means that we accept reality. When we live, we got to accept it, right? So if I actually want to be stress-free, if I want to have inner peace, well-being, resiliency, if I want these things, I need to accept the reality that those things come from what? Comes from virtuous activity. It comes from developing patience. It comes from developing compassion. It comes from, if I want love and kindness and compassion in my life, the only cause for that is me cultivating that. It doesn't come from surrounding myself with pleasurable, beautiful people and things and events. Right? That doesn't arise. Matter of fact, that's actually the cause for the mentally afflicted states, because I really want this to look like that, and I want this to be like that, and then the stress and stuff from all that. And the 8 worldly concerns just take over. And that's just fundamentally true, and if it's not true, let me know. So accepting reality means that if I want this result, I need to create the cause for it. If I want an apple tree, an orange seed is not going to get me one. Which then implies that the only one that's going to change this mind is me. The only thing that's going to do that is learning to see reality, engaging in reality, life on life's terms. And if I want this result, this action won't get it. Anger and resentment does not create inner peace and well-being. It just doesn't. That's not the seeds. Grasping on to how things ought to be and how I would have liked them to be and how you ought to be is not going to be living in reality in any way, shape, or form. Because you, events, things that I experience are not the cause of my anger, resentment, frustration. It's just not. Right? Can't be. The real cause is how I perceive and relate to those events and causes and things. Mental formations, anger, resentment, jealousy, frustration, are in my mind. They're not out there. That's just reality. So even if I get to this point and I go discouraged, I'd much rather try to stay delusioned. Guess what I will not get? Inner peace and well-being and happiness. So in other words, the reality check is, if this seems more difficult, how am I ever going to find some inner peace if I don't take it on? Huh? If I want a house, I got to build a house. Talking about it ain't going to do it. Ignoring it's not going to do it. And that's just fundamentally, true. And it's easy to forget. Let's hope when we get to this next piece here, we'll see. There's 2 actions on 2 occasions, at the beginning and at the end. And I may touch more on that, but I do want to at least get to the main, I want to get to this. So these 2 actions, beginning and so 2 occasions. And so this is critical. So when we wake up, that's a beginning, right? There's 2 actions. I get up. Number 1, I awake. And this occasion, actually, well, that's the occasion. And then the action is setting a motivation. So as I talked about with the food, I can bring a motivation to it. If I want to engage in this day, I need to make some time right away in the morning. Let the mind go to something that's really meaningful, as opposed to wake up and have stuff to do. First thing in the morning, it's so important to set a motivation, to bring to mind the opportunity that's arising, bodhicitta, and the liberation that we can have, and to bring to mind a sense of reality and how I want to engage in this day. Interdependence is what I mean by reality. if I don't do that, it's really going to be hard to pull it up during the day. So set that, and then we'll check in. In the evening, there's an opportunity to reflect upon what did I do that was helpful. Rejoice in that. And what did I do that I need to correct, that's undermining this path and this journey. So I realized the time. But this is really the way that we're going to transform our daily life into practice, is to start that day. So we have preliminary practice, 4 thoughts that turn your mind to Dharma. Rare and precious human rebirth. Impermanence. We don't have this long. What are we going to do? Karma. How do I create mental habits and patterns that are effective? And what are the ones that are not? What's the karma, the habits and tendencies that are blocking me? Identify those, notice them. And then this 4th thought is recognizing the predicament we're in, samsara. Because unless we recognize that, there's really not going to be a way out of it. Because the mind will tell you, but you know what, if this next thing happens, I'm going to be really happy. I'll have it made. I'm going to decorate samsara really nice. But if I recognize that, then renunciation arises. So taking a little time in the morning, remember this incredible opportunity, and then bring to mind how I want to interact with others today, on purpose, with intention. Maybe bringing to mind some of the tips here that we talked about last week. How do I want to engage others? And if there's somebody I'm a bit challenged by, how would I like to engage with them today in a way that's meaningful? So if I do that in the morning, there's a shot that I'm going to do it during the day. And if I review in the evening, now I have an opportunity to really notice how I'm living my life. I'm noticing my mind. I'm noticing what arises. And I have an opportunity to course correct. And then I can transform everything into Dharma if I'm bringing my mind to that, if I'm bringing my mind to the nature of reality, to how can I cultivate merit and wisdom. All right, so let's do our dedication. Dedicating the merit and wisdom for the benefit of all sentient beings. Let us dedicate the merit and wisdom that we have accumulated both individually and collectively, today and throughout our lifetimes, for the benefit of all sentient beings. May all sentient beings be free of suffering, find lasting happiness and liberation. And may we be able to use the merit and wisdom accumulated here today and throughout our lifetimes to purify our own minds, to cultivate the 2 bodhicittas, the mind of awakening for the benefit of all sentient beings. All right, well, thank you all so much for tonight, and thanks for joining us online.